Omar, for that kind introduction. And as a member of GEFI's Global Steering Group, and also as Chief Executive of the Chartered Banker Institute, a long-standing partner, colleague and friend of the Asian Institute of Chartered Bankers, it's great to have the opportunity to join you for Ethical Finance ASEAN 2023. I think that term ethical finance covers a very wide range of areas, but certainly in my view, there is at present no more important and globally relevant area than the intersection of finance and sustainability, where purpose-led ethical professionalism helps banks and bankers create shared sustainable prosperity, economically sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and socially sustainable for all of us. Now, building capacity, capabilities, and cultures of banks and institutions to try and achieve this is a major focus of my work, as I know it is for my fellow virtual fireside guest. I'm delighted to be joined by Dato Lee Lung Nien, Chairman of South Asia Citi Private Bank, also Head of South Asia and Global Market Manager for Singapore and Malaysia for Citi. Now, Lung's a very experienced banker with over 30 years in financial services, mostly with Citi in Malaysia and the ASEAN region. So look, you'll have seen banking and finance evolve dramatically in ASEAN, and I guess as part of one of the world's largest banks globally during your kind of extensive career. Would you kind of agree with me, though, that there's something a little bit different about the sustainability agenda? This isn't a short-term fad. It's more of a global mega trend reshaping business, society, and of course our world in banking too.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, for the introduction. You're absolutely right. There's a big shift, right? I've been in this business, like you said, for over 30 years. And, you know, in the old days, despite my young looks, I've been around the block quite a bit. And in the past, there was never talk about, and when I talk about the past, I'm talking about 5-10 years prior, no one talked about sustainability. No one really talked about ESG, climate change. Well, but these days, I see a distinct shift in questions being asked by new clients. And in the space that I work in, which is in the private banking space, we have the multimillionaires, the billionaires, all the way down to the next generation. And we see the shift in questions from the clients, especially the next generation, so the younger folks. And they are asking, and they are ranking the financial institutions. They are interested in understanding what the institution's policies are like, what products that are sustainable they're being offered out there, what sort of impact investing that they can do through the organization. So these sort of questions we've never been asked, I would say 5-10 years ago. But every time we meet now, there will inevitably be one question around sustainability, around our policies, around our goals and what we're doing about it. I'm not sure, Simon, and from your perspective, a broad perspective across seeing all these FIs and with GEFI and all, do you see that sort of trend, what I just said?
Oh, absolutely. I think, perhaps 10 years ago, a lot of this was driven more by the sort of policy and regulatory agendas. But now it's very definitely been driven by client and customer demand. And I think that's true in the private banking space. I think it's true certainly in Europe and the UK in increasing the retail banking space. So we're seeing a quite dramatic growth in the green mortgage market in the UK, for instance. But it's particularly true as well in the corporate banking space. When you look at the growth of green bonds, sort of green and sustainability linked loans, and lots of other things too. I mean, it's probably worth remembering that although there's been a lot of rapid growth, green and sustainable finance is still a niche. It's probably about less than 4 to 5% of finance overall. So we've got a long way to go to align finance with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Paris. But we are moving, albeit kind of slowly, in the right direction.
Can I just ask you then? Is it a particular sector or age group? Do you agree with me that it's the younger folks versus the older folks or the older, or corporations that are looking into this space?
It's a really interesting question, actually. So, I mean, certainly, I think the next generations are certainly sort of inspired by whether it's Greta Thunberg, whether it's the David.
I was going to bring up her name, yeah.
Hopefully, she's a client of yours. I hope, but whether it's the David Attenborough documentaries and things. So there was always kind of I suppose, the ethical, the environmental imperatives, and I think you see that with some of the older generations too, who are thinking about legacy and sort of passing on not just sort of wealth, but wanting to pass on kind of sustainable prosperity to future generations. But then also, I think there's whether you believe in the sort of the climate science, I certainly do. I believe in science, but almost that kind of environmental and ethical imperatives, you can put that to one side and say, if we're having this global transition to a more sustainable, low carbon world, a whole economy transition that's going to impact almost every economic entity over the next sort of 30 or so years, then from a risk perspective and a commercial opportunity perspective, it's something we ought to be leaning into as banks and bankers too, right? I mean, is that something you're seeing? Do you approach this not just from that kind of ethical finance perspective, but from a hard-nosed commercial perspective too?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? I would say box it up into three areas. One is regulatory, right? Within the region here in ASEAN, we see central banks, government agencies coming out with policies, questioning financial institutions around their policies, and governments, the governments in general, talking about sustainability, new departments setting up, Ministry of Sustainability in different countries. In the past, I would say over the last 10 years, these new departments within ministries have been popping up. So regulatory would be one aspect that's driving this. Obviously, the second one is consumer driven or commercial driven, right? If financial institutions or organizations do not reinvent ourselves, I think there will be business impact, because the clients that are approaching this, and we look at, and we talked about this earlier, about age group, because with the next generation, the third generation, the young, my kids, for example, right? They have this language, right? Is it green? Do you believe in greenwashing? They question authority, and they are much more bold about their views. I personally believe it's because of social media, the influence of social media, how this will, I think you mentioned low single digit of growth at the moment within the sustainability area, but with social media, this will explode, and it will grow exponentially if none of us are prepared for it, right? So first one, regulations. Second one is commercial driven, and the third one, I think it's over time education. Education and basically discussions, open forums such as this, awareness, right? That even my mom may ask. My mom has asked, are you going to recycle that? Because back in the day, Simon, when I was growing up, milk didn't come in cartons, if you remember. They came in bottles.
Glass bottles. I know the milkman used to bring it, and it's electric.
Exactly,
right. Milk float in the UK as well.
Exactly, and if you return the bottle, you get a rebate. I remember that when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So things like that. I mean, when you talk to, it's interesting, because when you talk to the older generation, they'll talk to you. Sometimes they say, "What do you mean recycling?" We've always had that. Yeah. It's just that commercial aspects has driven it slightly differently.
So there's definitely a mindset to this as well, and that mindset is we need to share, I guess, across society. But then there's also, if we're going to engage successfully with the next generations and the companies of the future and things, and also if we're going to reinvent financial institutions, to pick up on your phrase, we're really talking about a seismic shift in the capacity, the capabilities, the cultures of banks and bankers to be able to engage with this agenda, because a mindset isn't enough. There are some specific knowledge and skills we need in the design of products, in risk management, in the advice we give. So I'm kind of wondering, how's ASEAN doing with that? Are you seeing banks really engage with this and build knowledge and skills?
Okay, so I like that part where you mentioned culture, right? Culture takes years to change. In ASEAN, I'll be upfront with you, we are behind the curve. Okay, there are financial institutions and corporations that want to do the right thing, but lack the technical expertise, lack the knowledge, and lack the training. So if I were to be upfront and frank, it would be, we are behind the curve. We've got a long way to go, and there's a lot to do. So
I would assess finance as a whole globally as being behind the curve too. I mean, there are some examples of some institutions that are very much kind of leading the push, but they tend to be the small, more specialized ones, like a Triodos. Although I'd give a good shout out to banks like sort of ING, who are kind of real climate leaders. But globally, financial institutions' portfolios are aligned with about 3.7 degrees of global warming at the moment. Targeted below
but
1.5.
To that point, we are forced to change, right? Because the clients are driving us in that direction, and we have to change. And it's the right thing to do, because as the population ages, the conversation changes. My kids who are 25 now, 25 around that age, have a different vocabulary than someone in their 70s. So unless financial institutions change the policies and approach our clients differently, we will lose out.
We will. I mean, and so that's where I think if we can combine that sort of ethical imperative for including sustainability within our work as finance professionals, but also those commercial imperatives too, then we potentially create a very dynamic, hopefully unstoppable force for change. But it seems to me, though, the key here is that we don't need every banker to retrain as and take a PhD in climate science. And that's not the goal here. What we need is sort of banks and bankers who lend and invest and advise clients and develop products and services, just as we do now, that are good financial products with positive financial outcomes for our clients and customers, but that also have a positive sustainability impact too. And we're financing the technologies, the sectors, the firms that are green and sustainable, and we're kind of slowly divesting away from those sectors that aren't. And that to me implies a knowledge of sustainability, but applied in the context of the professional banking knowledge and skills we have.
So Simon, you're spot on there, right? And every organization is doing their little bit. I know here at Citi, we've got task force, we've got a network group, we've got senior leaders leading conversations, leading departments as to how to implement and how to deal with clients, and offering new products that are required. So, but different organizations are at different stage in the curve, right? So it's still a long way, because like you rightly put earlier, the knowledge is not there. At the moment, we are being forced a little by regulation. We are forced by the commercial aspect, because clients are asking about green bonds, asking about impact investing, right? And the younger people that we hire now, that's interesting. Yeah, I've interviewed quite a few people to join the private banking space. And the ones right out of university ask different questions. They say, so what's your organization's sustainability or ESG policies? Is there a department that I can go and learn about ESG? Is there a department that puts out products? Is there research around it? As compared to historically, it's about, so tell us how much you're going to pay me.
Exactly. No, I agree. I absolutely see that from our perspective too here in the UK and Europe. You know, young people are looking for a purpose-led career. But I think we need to do a big job of education, though, to help them understand that, you know, if you really want to save the world, then one of the best things you can do is join a bank, because I don't think this is widely understood. In the Paris Agreement has 3 objectives. The first one people tend to know: keep global temperatures below 2 degrees, as close to 1.5 as possible. Second objective is to promote kind of climate resilient development, so we can adapt to the warming climate. But the third of 3 objectives in the Paris Agreement calls out the role of finance, and it says, you know, countries must align flows of finance with reducing emissions and climate resilient development. So, you know, we have a great case to make to young people to say, if you want to change the world, then, you know, join a bank and help us align banking and finance with creating shared prosperity for current and future generations.
So can I ask you then, how do we bridge the gap then, right? Because you've got existing bankers and you've got new bankers that are coming in, right? Existing bankers probably stuck in their old ways, people like me, you know, rather old school, right?
I don't think you should give up yet.
So how do we bridge that gap between someone like myself, right, versus a university graduate? Is it just education? Is it more events like this? Is it, how do we communicate? What's the game plan? So in your opinion?
I think it's helping kind of, you know, existing experienced bankers understand that they already have many of the skills as bankers that we need to fund the transition. You know, they'll already be great at, you know, I mean, throughout your 30-year career, you must have been involved with, you know, lots of different sort of technologies, lots of different sectors, firms and clients and things, and you've had to learn about them. So this is what we're doing now. We're learning about renewable energy, about sort of low carbon business models and things. But what the existing bankers have that new graduates don't is all that experience of, you know, developing structured products for, you know, oil and gas infrastructure and things. Well, that's entirely transferable to looking at renewable energies, you know, offshore wind. You know, the challenges of building kind of big offshore wind farms, you know, is very, very similar to the challenges of building, you know, offshore oil platforms at one extent, and certainly financing them can be. So it's applying all that knowledge and skill and expertise, but with a knowledge of sustainability. And so I think you know, just whether it's attending things like these or learning about sustainability through some of the training programs that people like the AICB and ourselves offer, you know, is the way to go. So please don't give up. Just
no, Simon, I was just being facetious. It's actually a plug, because at Citi we've partnered a local university, Singapore Management University, right? And part of the program, a financial literacy program for young adults. And in one of the modules includes sustainable investing, which we teach, work together with the local university. So the bank and the university, Citi and the local university come together, put together a module to teach young adults. So, you know, we are doing our part. It's just, I think we need more of it, right? We need more of it.
So we do. So allow me to give a bit of a plug as well then in that case.
There we go.
Because I think, you know, recognizing the strategic importance of all of this. So last year, so my own institute, the Chartered Banker Institute, and the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative launched something called the Principles for Responsible Banking Academy. Now, I'm sure the Principles for Responsible Banking will be spoken about in different sessions at the summit. They are designed to align banks' strategies, activities, and operations with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. The PRB Academy is designed to build the capacity and capabilities of banks and bankers worldwide to do that. So it brings together the UN experts in sort of climate and sustainability, together with the banking experts at the Chartered Banker Institute. And we are hugely ambitious, and we aim to be training hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of bankers around the world sort of every year. So, please come and take a look at the PRB Academy.
So Simon, quick question for you, right?
Yeah.
Being the banker and a senior manager in this organization, I always ask the question, how do we track, and what does success look like for you in achieving these goals, right? I mean, we roll out these programs. What does success look like for you?
Success is, I think, quite simple to define in one way. It's that, every banking and finance professional, as part of their study, alongside learning about credit, about risk, about regulation, sustainability would be a core part of that learning. It's not an elective, not an added extra. It's one of those things that you need to learn and to understand in order to be a successful chartered banker of the future.
Oh, absolutely. I like that answer. I really do. And let me ask you, in our chartered banker program, when I did it, it was quite a few years ago. Have we incorporated that into the modules and incorporated that into the exams? Do they have to write a paper around it or something?
Yeah, at the moment there's a separate certificate at the moment in green and sustainable finance. There's one in climate risk as well. And this year we're in the process of fully integrating that right throughout the main chartered banker qualification. And in fact, many other professional bodies are doing similar things.
Oh, fantastic. And I commend you, and I commend the Chartered Banker Institute on doing that, being forward-looking and to a certain extent forcing the issue.
Yeah, well, we have to. I mean, this is the future of banking and finance for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Great. So, well, thank you. I think that's been a fascinating conversation and discussion. We've managed to cover a lot in our allotted sort of 20 minutes.
Simon.